We've all heard stories of betrayal, stories of heartbreak, but what you're about to hear is something far darker, something not even a twisted mind could easily imagine. This is the story of Noura. It happened back in 2017. Mustafa was a hard-working young man, living with his family in a modest neighborhood in Giza, Egypt. His parents were kind, honorable people who did everything they could to raise him and his siblings with strong values. After graduating with a diploma in industrial crafts, Mustafa's father bought him a microbus so he could start working for himself and help support the family. Mustafa's bond with his family was solid. He trusted them with everything, even his personal life. At 26 years old, after much convincing from his mother, Mustafa finally agreed to the idea of marriage. He hadn't wanted to marry at first, until one day, he caught sight of a girl walking through his neighborhood. She was beautiful, breathtaking even. He asked around about her. Her name was Nurhan, but everyone called her Noura. She was only 18, and according to everyone who knew her, she was described as an angel. Encouraged, Mustafa asked his family to approach her family. It turned out they were distant relatives. When they visited Noura's home, everything went smoothly. Her family agreed, and so did Noura herself. The engagement was brief, only 6 months, because Mustafa already had a ready apartment right above his family's home. During the engagement, everything seemed normal. But Mustafa's mother couldn't shake off a strange feeling. So, one day, she sat privately with Noura and told her, "If you're not happy, we can end this quietly, without hurting anyone." But Noura smiled sweetly and insisted she was thrilled, that she was proud to be marrying a man like Mustafa. The wedding day came. Noura moved into Mustafa's apartment above his parents' place, and on the first night, Mustafa noticed something odd. Noura was extremely nervous. He brushed it off. It was normal, right? By the second day, things calmed down, but that night would be the last time Mustafa would ever truly be with his wife. On the fourth day of marriage, Noura began acting strangely. She would pick fights out of nowhere, get angry over the smallest things. Mustafa was confused, but he stayed silent, unwilling to alarm his family. On the fifth day, things took a darker turn. Noura packed her belongings and locked herself inside a separate room, refusing to sleep beside him. Still, Mustafa didn't want to cause a scene, but his mother saw the sadness in her son's eyes. Days passed. Mustafa would leave early for work, return home exhausted, eat dinner alone, and sleep alone. The woman he had married barely spoke to him anymore. 2 weeks into the marriage, a huge argument broke out. Mustafa's parents rushed upstairs and found Noura still isolating herself in the children's room, door locked. Once again, Mustafa's mother spoke to her kindly, offering her a way out if she wasn't happy. But once again, Noura smiled and said she was simply stressed, adjusting to her new life. And life went on. The same cruel cycle every day. Until one day, Noura announced she was pregnant. Mustafa froze. He knew, deep inside, there was no way. They had barely shared any intimacy. Still, he said nothing. But just when the shock of her pregnancy news sank in, Noura dropped another bomb. She wanted an abortion. She said she felt anxious and unsure about their marriage, and feared bringing a child into this unstable home. Mustafa was crushed, but out of respect for her wishes, he agreed. They went through with the abortion. Afterward, Noura left Mustafa's home and stayed with her family for 15 days. 45 days into the marriage, and not a single moment of happiness. After 2 weeks, she called Mustafa, asking him to come get her. She said she missed their home. He picked her up, hopeful, but the moment she stepped back inside, everything returned to the same miserable routine. Noura would isolate herself in the children's room, lock the door, and refuse any connection, night after night. And then, stranger things began happening. Mustafa would drink a juice she made him, then feel excruciating stomach pains at work, rush to the hospital for emergency treatment. One day, he found the microbus brakes tampered with, the brake fluid completely drained. Another day, the engine oil mysteriously disappeared, nearly causing a fatal accident. And sometimes, Mustafa's father would spot a strange young man lurking around the vehicle, but every time he tried to catch him, the man would run away and vanish. Suspicion crept in, but still, Mustafa said nothing. 80 days into the marriage, another major fight erupted. His parents heard loud banging. They found Mustafa desperately pounding on the locked door where Noura was hiding. Minutes later, they spotted Noura standing outside, in the street below. How? She had opened the window, jumped onto the neighbor's roof, then climbed down into the street. Everyone thought maybe she was just terrified. No one imagined the truth. 5 days later, exactly 85 days into the marriage, Mustafa came home as usual. They had dinner together. Then he and Noura went into their room and locked the door. At 11 p.m., Mustafa's mother remembered she needed to ask him something. She knocked gently on their door. No response. She knocked harder. Finally, Noura's voice came from inside. "Just a minute." Noura opened the door slightly and said, "Mustafa's sleeping. He's really tired." She closed the door, locking it firmly. She even offered her mother-in-law a glass of juice. But something in her eyes, something in her voice, made Mustafa's mother refuse. At 2 a.m., Mustafa's parents were jolted awake by a loud crash from upstairs. A heavy, chilling sound. But then, silence. In the early morning, they woke unusually early. Something felt wrong. They opened their apartment door and noticed Mustafa's door wide open. The microbus was still parked outside. No one had left. Heart racing, Mustafa's father rushed upstairs. He found the apartment in chaos, a scene of deliberate destruction. He raced to the bedroom. There, on the bed, he found his son lying still, his face covered in blood, strange fluids dripping from his mouth. Mustafa was gone. The horror spread through the building like wildfire. When the police arrived, they found no signs of robbery. Everything valuable was still there. It wasn't random. It was staged. When they questioned Noura over the phone, she claimed she had left early in the morning to go to the market, leaving Mustafa asleep and healthy. But the forensic report told another story. Mustafa had been poisoned with a deadly mixture of sleeping pills, coloring agents, and pesticide. He had also been beaten with a blunt object and suffered multiple bruises. The police didn't buy Noura's lies for a second. A few hours later, they arrested her. Cornered, Noura broke down and confessed everything. She wasn't alone. She had an accomplice, a young man named Amr, 22 years old. He was her lover. The one she had been forbidden to marry by her father because he was seen as a worthless thug. Since day one of her marriage to Mustafa, Noura had been sneaking Amr into their home. Every morning she drugged Mustafa's honey with sleeping pills, making sure he passed out before Amr arrived. They would spend the day together while Mustafa lay unconscious in the next room, while his parents were living downstairs, completely unaware. At night, Amr would leave before sunrise. Their plan escalated. First, they tried sabotaging Mustafa's microbus to cause a fatal accident. Then, they poisoned his drinks, hoping he would die without suspicion. But nothing worked. So, on the night of the murder, Noura added sleeping pills and pesticide into his dinner. When Mustafa struggled in the middle of the night, clutching his stomach and heading for the bathroom, he caught them. Without hesitation, Noura struck him in the face with a heavy metal gas key. Amr rushed in and beat Mustafa viciously until he collapsed. The loud crash his parents had heard, it was Mustafa's body hitting the floor. Minutes later, Mustafa's soul left his body, alone, betrayed, and broken. Noura and Amr spent the next hours destroying the apartment, making it look like a robbery gone wrong, before fleeing at 6 a.m. But justice caught up with them. They were both sentenced to death. And Mustafa, the innocent man who only wanted love and family, paid the ultimate price for trusting a devil in disguise. May he rest in peace.